Ooh, my makeup looks dope with this filter.
So my best friend Amy wanted to learn how to knit a dishcloth, and I know how. So I'm gonna teach you and Amy, but this is mainly for Amy, so everyone else is just here. Hi, Amy. So this is my grandma's formula, and I've adapted it. This is not for beginners, so if you don't know how to knit, I don't know how to help you, man. This isn't for you. I have put the full pattern in the description, so if you already know how to read a pattern, it'll be there.
You'll need cotton yarn, your choice and size of needles. I chose US number 7, and a darning needle.
Now you want to start with a decent amount of yarn for the tail, and then we're going to be casting on. This is how my grandmother taught me. It's the easiest way for me, but the way I do it, it's just loops. You almost always have to knit a row after, otherwise it just kind of comes unraveled. When you go to switch the needles with your hands, make sure you keep the tail separate, because the amount of times I have knit the tail instead of the ball of yarn is just embarrassing. Now the first row we're going to knit is just going to be knitting 4 stitches straight across. Now the second row is where things get a little bit different. We are going to knit the first 2 stitches the regular way, just knit 2. And then we're going to loop the yarn around the needle once. This is going to create the hole on the side of the perimeter of the dishcloth. And then you're going to knit the rest of the stitches, the rest of the 2 regular, and then you should end up with 5 stitches. This next row, we are doing the exact same thing as the row before. We're going to knit the first 2 stitches, wrap the yarn around the needle, then continue knitting regularly to the end of the row. Now if you pull your work down a little bit, you can see a hole forming in the center. That is part of the border. Now for the next row, we're going to be knitting 2 again. And you're gonna start to see a pattern here. We knit 2, we loop 1, we knit to the end of the row. We are going to continue to do this until we hit 40 stitches. It is exactly the same each row, knit 2, wrap the yarn around the needle, knit to the end of the row. So what I'm going to do is fast forward this until I'm at 40 stitches so I can show you how to decrease. So at this point in the video, feel free to pause to catch up, and if you lose track of how many stitches you have, you should have 40 by the time you're ready to decrease. So just knit 2, wrap the yarn around, knit to the end of the row, and keep doing that until you reach 40, and then I'll show you how to decrease. Now you can see here the holes in the border are caused when you wrap the yarn around the needle. So just by wrapping it around, it makes a hole. So that's one way to increase. It's not the only way you can increase a stitch, but this is what we need to do to create the border. Now that you have 40 stitches, this is what it should look like, a nice clean border all the way around and a nice triangle shape. Now to decrease, we are going to knit 1 stitch. Then we'll knit 2 together. So you want to put that needle through 2 stitches, wrap around and pull over. This is the beginning of forming the corner. Now we're going to wrap the yarn around the needle just like before and knit 2 together as well. And then just like before, we knit to the end of the row. So for the purpose of saving time, I'm not going to show you the full scene of me knitting to the end of the row because I just won't have enough time in this video. So just know that you do that first little section and then you're going to knit to the end of the row just like normal. So we're going to do this one more time. We're going to knit the first stitch. Then we're going to knit 2 stitches together. Wrap the yarn around the needle, knit 2 stitches together again. You end up with this loose stitch right here. Don't worry too much about that. It's just the extra stitch when you knit 2 together. When you go to knit your next stitch, it tightens up and you won't even be able to tell. It just seems loose, especially if you're using bigger needles. Now you're going to knit to the end of the row. This is what it should look like after you've decreased 2 rows. So you can see the corners are starting to form, they're starting to curl, and then they will continue as it gets smaller. Each time you decrease, it starts exactly the same, so just do the same pattern. You can rewind the video as many times as you need to get that down pat. I'll also leave a little formula for you for when you go to pause the video to catch up. Now what you're going to want to do is just keep decreasing until you have 4 stitches, and then I'll show you how to cast off. Now, if the numbering of the rows is confusing you, don't worry too much about it because you can make this dishcloth any size you want. You could do 20 stitches and then decrease instead of 40. It's just going to make it smaller. Or if you have bigger needles, that might make more sense. So when I say row 36, that's just for people who know how to read a pattern if they're reading in the description so they know where we're at. Don't worry too much about that and don't stress if you're not there because honestly, when I'm doing this by myself, I rarely keep track. I just increase until I feel like it's big enough and then start decreasing. And then you just keep decreasing until there's nothing left. So it's pretty basic once you get the hang of it. So just watch it over and over if you need to and do your thing. Okay, now it should look like this. You've got 4 stitches left on the needle. Now to cast off, we're going to knit the first 2 stitches. I just want to quickly apologize. My hands go out of frame a little bit. It'll come back down when we're doing the hard part, but just knit the first 2. Now we're going to leapfrog the back stitch over top of the front stitch and off the needle. And we're going to knit the next stitch and do the same thing. We're going to leapfrog the back stitch over the front stitch and off the needle. And you're going to do that with this last stitch as well. And we're going to leapfrog it over the front stitch. Okay. That's going to be stuck in your head. I hope it is. Now pull the needle out, make that last loop bigger, and you're just going to put the tail through it and then pull tight. And that is the end. Now, the reason why I wanted to keep the first tail a little bit longer is so that we can get our darning needle and weave through so that it doesn't unravel. Some people tie a knot in the end. I prefer not to do that. I think that a nice clean stitch just looks better and it doesn't unravel. So we're just gonna weave the tail back in through. This is nice because the very end that we just cast off sometimes ends up a little bit pointy. So this is a good way to kind of round that corner out. Now I always go up the side of the border and then back down the side of the border and then up one more time just to really make sure it doesn't unravel. So I'm gonna do that on both sides with the tail and then you'll have a nice clean edge.